Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. In this lecture we're going to create a simple options menu where we can modify the audio levels. Okay, so here let's make the options menu. So on our game scene, let's go into the canvas and create a new empty game object. Let's make this the options UI. Let's stretch out this one to occupy the entire screen. Then inside, let's make a UI image. Once again, let's stretch out everything. Let's put this one in black in just almost full alpha. Okay. Now let's make some text. So let's create a brand new UI text. Call it the options text. Then for text, let's say just options. Let's put the width and height at 0. Let's disable wrapping, put it center down the middle, and put it quite a lot bigger. Okay, that's the options. Now just move it slightly upwards. All right. Now let's make some simple buttons to handle our audio controls. We're going to make it super simple, literally just a button we can click. So inside the options UI, let's create a brand new button. Call this the sound effects button. Then let's make the button a bit bigger, something like this. Okay. And inside for the text, let's say sound effects, and then we're going to have a number for the sound effects. Let's just quickly change the color. So put the text in white and the button over here, the button image, let's put it in a dark gray. Okay. Let's also make it just a tiny bit thinner, just like that. Okay. So this is the sound effects button. Now let's duplicate this one. This one is going to be the music button. So let's name this the music button. Then inside for the text, music, and then a number. And that's pretty much it. So by clicking on either of these buttons, we're going to increase and then loop the volume. So let's make a simple script to handle our options window. So in our scripts inside the UI, let's create a brand new C# script for the options UI. Let's go ahead and attach a script and open. So here, as usual, let's get some fields for our buttons. So a serialized field, private, of type button for the sound effects button. And then there's another one for the music button. Okay, both buttons. Now let's add the click event. So on private void awake, let's go into the sound effects button. And on the on click, let's add a listener. And we're going to do the same thing on the music button. Okay, so now when we click, we want to change the volume. So let's go here onto the sound manager and make a function to modify the volume. Let's make a private void change volume. And here we're going to increase the volume by 0.1%, so constantly increase in 10% increments. So that means we need to keep track of the volume. So up here, let's define a simple private float for the volume. Let's default it to 1F, okay. So now down here, we take the volume and we increase it by 0.1F. And now let's loop it back to 0. Now for looping, usually you do it using the modulo operator. So here you could do volume equals volume modulo of 1.1F. That way, when it gets to 1.1F, it would reset back to 0. But here, since we're working with floats, which can have a bit of odd precision, with this, let's just do a simple if to make sure that it always works. So if the volume is above 1F, if so, then let's just reset it to 0. Okay. So here we modified the volume, and let's just make sure to use it over here when we actually call the audio source.playClip at point. Here we've got a volume, but this is the one that we received as a parameter. So let's actually receive this one, rename this to volume multiplier. And we're going to basically multiply the one that we receive in the parameter by the one that we actually store. So this way on these functions, when we play a certain sound, we can still give an optional volume if we want to make it louder or quieter than the regular sound effects. Okay, so we have our change volume function. Now we just need to call this from the options UI. So that means this one actually needs to be public. Okay. So now here on the options UI, we go into the sound manager, access the instance, and call change volume. Okay, so that is going to change the volume. Then we just need to update the values on the options UI. So let's make a private void update visual. And this one we need to update the text. So up here, let's add once again some more serialized fields. So text mesh pro UGUI, one for the sound effects text and another one for the music text. Okay, we have both these. Then here the sound effects text.text equals, and we go into the sound manager, the instance. And then we need to get the volume. So over here on the sound manager, let's make a function to get it. So a public float return get volume, and we just return the volume. Okay, so then here let's get volume, except the volume is going to be a normalized value. So rather than showing 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 on the UI, let's just multiply the volume by 10f. That way we show between 1 and 10. Okay, then let's just round out this number and then add the text. So here's sound effects, and then we have the volume. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And up here, when we change the volume, let's just update the visual. And let's also make a private void start. And on start, let's also update the visual. Okay, that's it. Pretty simple. Now let's do the exact same thing on the music. Except on the music manager, we named it music manager, but over here we just have an audio source. There's no actual manager. So let's actually make one. Let's create a new C# script for the music manager. Let's go into the music manager object. Let's attach a script and let's open. So here we really just need pretty much exactly the same thing that we had. So let's just go here into the sound manager and just copy these. So on the music manager, let's paste them. We need a volume, so a private float for the volume, just like this. Okay, so that changes the volume. Except again, the music manager, this one, the music is constantly going to be on looping. So after we modify the volume, we need to update the actual audio source. So let's first begin by grabbing the audio source, and we just do a private void awake. And on awake, let's grab the audio source, get the component of type audio source. Okay, so we have this. And when we change the volume, let's go here and update this volume. Okay, that's it. And let's also default it to something like 0.3f. Okay, good. Then in order to be able to call this from the options UI, we just need to make it a singleton. So as usual, public static music manager for the instance. And we have a public get and a private set. And then in awake, just set instance equals this. Okay. So then here on the options UI, we can go into the music manager, the instance, and change the volume. And afterwards, let's update the visual. And down here on the update visual, let's do pretty much the same thing. So on the music text, modify the text to say music. Then we go into the music manager and get the volume. All right, that's it. All this should be working. Let's just drag our references. So back in the editor, let's drag first the button. So the sound effects button, that's this one. Then the music button, that's this one. Then we have the music text, that's this one. And the sound effects test like that. Okay, let's test. Okay, so here we are, the music is playing, and as I click, the music is currently getting louder and louder. And there you go, music is at max volume, and if I click again, now the music is completely muted. Alright, awesome, and these sound effects also work, so like this, they should be less louder than usual. Okay, great. So everything works perfectly, except obviously we have one big issue. The options window is on top of everything. The goal is for the options window to be kind of a submenu of the pause window. We want to have an options button on the pause window that will bring up the options window. So let's do that. Let's first hide the options window. Let's go into the game pause UI. And over here we have these buttons. Let's just make one more. Let's put it down the middle. This is going to be the options button. And inside, let's modify the text to options. Okay. Now let's edit this script. So we're going to have another button. So this is the options button. And down here, we're going to have another click. So the options button. Okay. And when this happens, we want to just show the options window. So in order to access it, let's make this a singleton. So public static for the options UI, a static instance with a get and a private set. And on awake, as usual, instance equals this. So over here on the game pause UI, we go into the options UI, access the instance, and then call a show function. So we need to make this. So up here on the options UI, let's make those. So a public void show. And this one, as usual, just game object set active into true. And then we have a private void hide. And this set active into false. Okay, we have both these. On the other side, we show it. And over here on start, let's also hide it. Okay. Then let's also hide it manually. So let's add a button to close the options UI. So over here, let's show the options UI and let's make another button. Let's put it on the bottom. This one is the close button. And over here, let's just say close. So then here on the options UI, just make another button, the close button. And down here for the click event, we go into the close button and we just call hide. Okay, so that won't hide the window. However, remember that the pause window can also be closed by just pressing escape. If we resume with a hotkey, it won't hide the pause window. So let's also make sure this one hides on the same thing. So we can do pretty much going to the kitchen game manager, the instance, and let's listen when the game is unpaused. So when that happens, let's hide this window. So once again, let's do things nice and clean. Let's rename this. So the kitchen game manager. And when this happens, let's just hide. Okay, this should work. Let's just drag all the references. So first here on the options UI, let's drag the close button. And then on the game pause UI, let's drag the options button. Okay, so let's test. And yep, right away the options window is not showing. That's great. And if I press an escape, there you go, there's the pause window. And if I click on options, yep, there's the options window. Now if I click on close, back here, back into resume, okay, works. Now if I pause, options, and now press on the escape key, and yep, there you go, it closes everything. All right, great. So everything is working fine. However, we have one slight issue. The option does work, so I can modify this to change the sound effects and the music volume. So for example, let's mute the music and put the sound effects on 5. So I put it like this, but now if I stop playing and I hit play again and look in the options, and nope, there's the issue. Basically the data is back to the defaults. Obviously that is resetting since we didn't actually save anything, so let's save it. Now in Unity, the easiest way to save some data is using player prefs. So let's go over here on the sound manager, and when we modify the volume over here, when we do that, let's access the Unity player prefs, and over here we've got a bunch of set functions. So we can save a float, an int, or a string. This one, as you can see, takes a string and a value. So this is pretty much essentially just a dictionary. Now for the key, as you can see, it's a type string, but again, we should not be using strings directly. So let's go up here in order to make a proper constant. So a private const string. Let's call it player prefs sound effects volume. And let's go sound effects volume. Okay, we have our nice certain constant. And down here, when we set the float, let's use this string and save the volume. Okay, so that is going to set the float. And now technically Unity is going to automatically save the player prefs. Basically, there are only problems if Unity somehow crashes in between when you call set float and when it actually saves. But if you want to prevent that from happening, you can just go and tell it to save manually, just like that. That will definitely save it. And now we just need to handle loading. So up here on awake, when we have this, let's go into the player prefs and let's use get float. Let's pass in the same key. So this one takes a key and default value, so let's default it to 1F. Basically, the default value is used if there's no saved data on this player prefs on this key. So the first time we run, it's actually going to use this default. And this one's going to return the saved value, so let's just set it on the volume. Okay, so that's it. That's all it takes to save some basic data. Now let's do the exact same thing on music. So over here on the music manager, let's first define our private const string for the player prefs music volume. And this is going to be the music volume. Okay, we have our string. And then down here, when you change the volume, player prefs. And let's set the float on this key. And let's pass in the music volume. Okay, and then let's go into player prefs and actually save it. And now up here on awake, let's grab the volume. And it's going to be going to the player prefs in order to get the float on this key. And default value is 0.3F. However, over here on the music, again, we are not spawning the sound afterwards. The sound starts playing right away. So let's make sure to set the audio source volume to the one we grab from there. Okay, that's it. So like this, it should be working. So let's test. So here we are and the music is playing. Let's pause, go into the options. Let's bring the music completely down. So let's mute the music. Okay, the music is gone. And sound effects, let's put it on 5. Now let's stop playing and now play again. And going to the menu, options, and yep, there you go. The data was indeed saved and the music is indeed muted. All right, awesome. So here we have some basic data being saved. And also just a quick note related to saving. For this simple game, the sessions are pretty quick, so I didn't include any kind of save system for the actual game data. But if you want to know how to do that, I also have a video covering that topic. Okay, so with that we have our options window working. The volume sliders work perfectly. The next thing we need to add to our options is some key rebinding. So let's do that in the next lecture.